Hey, my name is Zach, and thanks for watching this parent class on technology. We live in a scary world where a lot of scary things can happen, and we don't always know what our kids are doing on their phones or how we can be protecting them from it. And that fear can be a prime motivating factor in the way that we parent our kids when it comes to technology. And so we hope that this next hour is really beneficial for you to help you learn and be equipped with the tools that you need in order to help your kids succeed with technology.
How do you guys know that?
Well, when we couldn't reach you, we called his number.
You guys talked to Steve?
No, we did not talk to him. We just heard his voice. We heard his voice.
Yo, yo, yo.
So how do you know his name?
We have our ways.
What ways? What did you guys do?
We went on your computer.
Your Facebook page.
No, you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You guys broke into my room and you hacked into my computer?
Wait a second, Missy. You have no right to get angry with us. You have been going out with this boy for over a month without telling us.
Okay, who cares, Homeland Security? What you guys did is illegal. You can't do that. It's a violation of everything.
Oh, no.
Hey, what? You're Facebook official.
Right.
That's right. You go up to your room because you're grounded.
Grounded.
Jawohl, mein Führer. I cannot believe that you would hack into my computer.
I hacked into your computer to find out what's going on with you.
What if I don't want you to know what's going on
I don't
with me?
care, Hattie. I'm your father. I have a right to know.
I have a right to my privacy.
Not in my house, you don't.
Okay.
Maybe it's different over at Steve's house with Marjorie and Dale.
You didn't.
Well, where'd you think we'd go when we couldn't find out where you were?
Dad!
We were worried about you, Hattie.
Oh my God.
They knew everything about us, and we didn't even know they existed. How do you think that felt?
Probably as bad as it feels finding out that your parents have no respect for your privacy.
Fine, you know what? That's it. No more cell phone, no more texting. You go to school, you come home from school. That's
No,
the way
you
it's gonna
have
be.
to
Are we
be kidding
clear?
me.
I am
You're
not kidding.
kidding.
Do I look like I'm kidding?
Okay, so we've all probably either wrestled with those tensions or have had those conversations, or if you're Chelsea, you were that child in high school. And she gave me permission to tell you that, so I'm not just like ratting her out. But no, I was, well, okay, once. But so what we see in that kind of clip is kind of the typical reaction between parents and their teenagers in today's culture, and it's a reactive form of parenting. There's we gave you this stuff, but you abused it and you kept secrets from us, so we're going to take it all away. And that reactive form of parenting breaks trust. It makes her feel like violated, that he invaded her privacy, and it's, what rights to privacy do our kids have if we're the parents and they're in our home and we pay the cell phone bill and all those kind of tensions. And so kind of before we go any further, I kind of want to just read from Scripture a mindset that I think that we should have when it comes to this kind of stuff. This is from the Apostle Paul. So it's basically, there's some first century analogies that we'll have to kind of skip past. But basically, this is the mindset I think we need to have when it comes to this technology, and it's this. He says, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but the good of others. Eat anything sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. If an unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go eat whatever is put before you without raising questions of conscience. But if someone says to you, this has been offered in sacrifice, then do not eat it, both for the sake of you, the one who told you, and for the sake of conscience. And that's just referring to the Jews who grew up with the laws of cleanliness. There were foods that were unclean that they couldn't eat. So he's talking about ideas of conscience as far as that goes. But here's the important part. He says, I'm referring to the other person's conscience, not yours. For why is my freedom being judged by another's conscience? If I take part in the meal of thankfulness, why am I denounced because of something I thank God for? So whether you eat or you drink or you give your kids smartphones or you don't give your kids smartphones or whatever it is, do it all for the glory of God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews or Greeks or the church of God. Basically, I don't care if they're Christian or not, don't cause them to stumble. Even as I try to please everyone in every way. For I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, that they may be saved. And I think this is the attitude that we have to approach this with, because we tend to think in the terms of, I have the right, that you just heard it in that clip, I have a right to privacy. Our kids fight that against us. We fight it with them. Well, I have a right to your phone. I have a right. And we get into this battle, and we fight these tensions of what our rights are, when we should rather be thinking in terms of what is most beneficial for everyone. And basically what we want to do in all areas of life, right, is to teach our kids to honor God, to teach our kids to seek not the good of just themselves, but the good of everybody, right? That's what we try to instill in our kids. And so the trick question seems to be how we do that with technology. How do we teach them to honor God and honor others with the smartphone that they have in their pocket all the time, with the computers in their rooms, all that kind of stuff. And we try to figure out what is okay, what's not okay. And we try to balance the tensions of the rights, like privacy versus boundaries or honesty or openness, or however you want to set that up. It's my phone versus my parents' phone. It's my body versus, well, others have to see it. And there's all these tensions, and what is my right? And I think we have to kind of dispel that kind of mindset. It's not about what our right is. It's about what is beneficial and what is constructive. And so in this class, I kind of want to I want to be humble about kind of how I present some of this stuff, because I'm not you guys yet. I don't have teenagers, and I get that. And so I'm going to try not to overstep and pretend like I know more than I do know. But I have worked in student ministry for several years now. My dad was a student pastor, and so I've been around kind of this culture, and I feel like I do have an understanding on today's technology, at least well enough that I could teach you some tips about this kind of stuff. But what we want to talk in this class about has primarily to do with the mindset. Because I'm going to give you some practical things that you can do, but here's the truth that we all face, is that apps are always developing and changing, and there's different things you have to look out for, and new technology surfaces, and so while I do have some practical tips that'll be relevant, what I'm going to try to do with this time is to provide you with a mindset and some principles to apply when it comes to technology that hopefully will last longer than just the very specific practical tips that I can give you that will be relevant for a short time. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the attitude I'm going for with this class. What is different about this issue than with any other issue is that unlike every other area of parenting, like when we have curfews, or we're all present at dinner time, or there's bedtimes, or you have to do your homework, whatever it is, you and I both grew up with those. We can say, hey, I know what it's like to be your age. I know what it's like to want to just forget about the homework and just go straight to the video games. I know what it's like to have feelings for somebody, and then they go, oh, stop, I'm gross, I'm grossed out, and you can talk about your kids because you've experienced those things. You were in middle school and high school once. But unlike all of those things, you and I did not grow up with smart devices. We did not grow up with the kind of technology that our kids have. In fact, a lot of us are trying to figure it out at the same time that our kids are. And a lot of us go to our kids for advice. You were just telling me at the beginning, a lot of us go to our kids for advice on the technology that we also use. And so this is very different. In other words, we weren't raised right about it to know how to raise right about it. And so that tension can instill a lot of fear in the way that we parent our kids, in the way that we try to monitor their technology, in the way that we try to balance the privacy versus boundaries. And And so that's why there's a lot of fear with this. And we're going to talk about some things in this class today that are kind of scary, just because I think there needs to be a higher awareness of what kids today do with their phones. And there needs to be a heightened sense of, just a heightened sense of awareness. And that's not to instill fear into you guys. The goal is to give you some practical and useful principles to apply to help you navigate through some of these fearful waters. So that's basically the goal of this class. So one of the highest priorities, hopefully, when it comes to the way you parent is honesty and openness. You want to have an environment in your home that your kids can be honest with you about anything, and you can be honest with your kids about stuff. And a lot of that, I think there's assumptions that we have when it comes to our kids, that because you and I weren't raised with smartphones or technology like that, we developed social lives, we developed how to have face-to-face conversations, and then we added technology to that, and we were able to, then kind of that became an extension of our lives, and it's just not the case for our kids. So while our minds were fully developed and able to process that in what you and I would refer to as common sense, our teenagers don't have that. And I think that's an assumption we forget about. So I have just a 60-second clip to kind of give kind of what goes on in the prefrontal cortex, which is in the frontal lobe of the brain. And it's in charge of executive function, as you'll see here. And this video talks about what the fully developed prefrontal cortex is responsible for, and then we'll go from there.
The prefrontal cortex, PFC, is the cerebral cortex which covers the frontal part of the frontal lobe, the brain region that's been implicated in planning complex cognitive behaviors or personality expression, decision making, and moderating social behavior. The basic activity of the brain region is considered to be an orchestration of thoughts and actions in accordance with internal goals. The most typical psychological term for functions carried out by the prefrontal cortex area is executive function. Executive function relates to the abilities to differentiate among conflicting thoughts, determine good and bad, better and best, same and different, future consequences of current activities, working toward a defined goal, prediction of outcomes, expectations based on actions, and social control. That is, the ability to suppress urges that, if not suppressed, could lead to socially unacceptable outcomes. The frontal cortex supports concrete rule learning, while more anterior regions along the rostral caudal axis of the frontal cortex support rule learning at a higher level of abstraction.
So that's something that you and I have developed in our brains, where we have that executive function that's refined over years of experience and processing information and figuring out what is better and best, what is less, and what are the long-term implications of my current activities. And these are things that our kids just don't have. They're not fully developed in that way, and that's why it's our job as parents to help them learn those things. And as they're developing in the prefrontal cortex area of their brain, as they're learning what it means to make those decisions on their own, and they're at the age where they're becoming more self-aware, they are gaining more independence. That part of their brain is developing, even though it's not fully developed. It is under construction, and they are becoming smarter and make better decisions. But in fact, they're able to make pretty convincing arguments, aren't they? Like why you should let them do something, or and our teenagers are smart, but they're misguided sometimes, and that's where it's our job as parents to help them in that executive function. And so it means what is being hardwired right now is more likely to stick with them for the rest of their lives. I have in fact, all the resources that I've used to look up information for this class, I'm actually, there's several links, there's several articles, there's stuff that I'm actually going to set up as like a packet almost, an online packet that you can refer to after this class. So I'm going to hit the surface level on a lot of this stuff because there's a lot of information. But you will have those resources that you can look further at to what I'm talking about. And that'll go for some statistics. That'll go for what's going on here in the brain. But basically the Cliff Notes version is when the neurons are sending messages back and forth from the brain, those pathways are being developed right now in their heads. And so the gray matter is being separated from the white matter, and it's building a wall around those neurons as it heads back and forth from the brain. And as they're learning, they're surrounded, they're learning how to react. This defines how they see themselves, which is different from the way you and I learned how to see ourselves because they're doing it with a screen most of the time. And what they think of when they see certain types of images, it triggers a different instinct for them than it did for us. How they will react to certain triggers. In other words, they are conditioning themselves. And we all go through this. We all go through a phase where we're conditioning ourselves. And our brains are actually, psychologists used to think that after the brains are finished developing, that all those hardwired processes in the brain are solid and they don't change again. But what they're actually discovering now is it can continue to change, but it's much harder to change, and it's much more reinforced based on the adolescent years of life. So what they're conditioning themselves with now, the way that they're thinking about things, the way they're processing the information, that's all being developed in the prefrontal cortex now, and it's conditioning them for life. So that's just an awareness thing, just so you know what's going on in their brain that's different from your brain. This makes it difficult for them to understand long-term ramifications of current activities. And what that means when it comes to our technology, like the comparison issue with social media is so huge. Like it almost creates affirmation addicts, which we even as adults can struggle with at times. But imagine that completely heightened, like times 10 for our adolescent teenagers. And they're processing questions like, am I cool or not? Why am I liked? Am I validated? Where's my self-worth? They are asking those questions through the lens of how many likes did I get versus how many likes did they get? How many people viewed my video versus how many people viewed? What about my story? How much activity are people paying attention to on my story versus how much I see so-and-so says they get on their story? And they're processing all that differently than you and I did. Because, again, we were developed and we could understand that's kind of just an extension of real life. It's not really real life. And for them, that's just harder to grasp. But what this says right here is that it makes it easy for them to miss the fact that virtual actions carry real-world consequences. And this is huge, because you and I take this as an assumption. We take it for granted. We understand that virtual actions carry real-world. You saw that post I made, even though I couldn't see you on the other side of the computer screen or the phone when I put it in there. You saw that picture. Okay. I was just trying to get a lot of likes. I didn't think that anyone was going to judge me for it. And they don't realize, I didn't think all the guys in my class were going to react to me now because I posted that. But now I get this different kind of attention. And they're coming to those decisions, how they see themselves and how they will react to certain triggers and what they will think of when they see certain types of images, that they're developing that as through the lens of social media. The comparison issue sets up a social dichotomy that defines everything else they see in life. It becomes the lens through which they interpret everything. So whereas you and I most likely see social media as an extension of our real lives, most adolescents more readily view their real lives as an extension of their digital lives, which is backwards from how you and I kind of just take that for granted. We understand that. But for our teenagers who have always grown up with this, this is news to them. And we may say it to them, but in their world, among their peers, in class, on sports teams, their real lives are very much dependable on what goes on in the digital world, what people are saying about them or not saying about them. Students that are not invited to a party but tagged in it on social media. And cyberbullying becomes a whole new thread of threats that never used to exist in traditional bullying scenarios. And so this is, again, just something for us to be aware of. And why, as parents, we need to step up and take the responsibility that God's given us in raising our kids to help them manage technology. As Asana O'Neill, an 18-year-old social media star, stated, social media, especially how I used it, isn't real. It's contrived images and edited clips ranked against each other. It's a system based on social approval, likes, validation and views, success and followers. And this is coming from someone who, for 2 years, played the game. She had 500,000 followers on Instagram, and she wrote in her blog about how she would spend hours a day trying to get the perfect bikini photo, and she would starve herself, and it was all related for building up a performance, for having a scenario in which she is the most liked person. And that's where she received validation and worth. And she finally said, I'm sick of it. That's not real. And she got wise to it. But most of our kids don't get wise to that, even the Christian ones, which we think would know better. But again, that's part of where they're at developmentally. And so, again, none of this to scare you, just for awareness. Internet, smartphones, and social apps are not going away. And that's a good thing, right? Because we connect with each other. There are good things to it. Therefore, this is not a problem to be solved, but a tension to be managed. This is an open door for conversation that we should have on a regular basis with our kids. This is something that should not be something that they're left in the dark to figure out on their own, which unfortunately happens far too often. So it's our job as parents to help them manage this tension and to have an active role in the way that they use and manage their technology. Kurt's going to come and talk about a different perspective on some of the stuff that he gets to see and what can happen when parents don't properly manage their technology.
Not here to scare you. I'll just start out with that. I've been teaching at Franklin High School for 20 years and am now coaching in the college ranks. And so Zach and I have talked many times about the difference between where parents come from and the side that I'm seeing at the school corporation and from the college level. And believe me, it's a big difference. We do, at the school corporation, we do offer classes that kids take, and we do it in our coach time at Franklin High School, talking about cyberbullying, why you should put things out there, why you shouldn't put things out there, making sure that they're, being productive when they're putting something out there, not tearing people down. And I mean, it's out there. I know they're doing it at the middle school too. And so, I just want to make sure you understand we are trying to prevent this. In my 20 years of teaching, technology has changed tremendously. Jeff knows that. I mean, all of you know that. And when I first started, there was no issue with it at all. You didn't have technology there. Now, it's a total different parameter. And in being different, you have to understand it evolves just as much for us as parents, as teachers, as school corporations. And so what we're doing is we're chasing just as much as you guys are. In the classroom, we're chasing. And everyone wants to sit back and please ask questions, whatever, if I get into something you want to know more about. Everyone wants to sit back and say, well, if you just told them to put their phones up, there'd be no issues. How many of you have your phone sitting out right now? Exactly. So when I go into a classroom and I have my kids come into a classroom, first thing I do is I say, all right, here's the deal. The school rule is you shouldn't have it out in the classroom. I tell them, you can have it out. I don't care if you text. I don't care if you're on it a little bit. But what I want you to do is understand, when I come back into what I'm teaching, you come back with me. You can send a quick text to mom and dad. If you need a phone call to be answered and something's going on at home, come talk to me about it. Tell me, hey, my mom and dad's calling, my grandpa's been sick. Okay, go answer it real quick. Come back into the classroom, come check right back into me. But you've got to have that understanding. I'm going to use mine. That's what I tell them. I'm a college coach. I'm recruiting kids all day long. I'm texting them while they're at school. I know they shouldn't be doing it. They know I shouldn't be doing it. We're all doing it. I mean, it's happening everywhere. So you have to have that understanding. And I think that gives me an understanding with the students when I'm in the classroom. Now, when we were young, our freedom was our driver's license, right? We got our driver's license. We were good to go. We were out of the house and all that. Kids nowadays, half of them aren't even looking at their driver's license as important anymore. And we took that as our freedom to get away from everybody. And we thought, man, that was the greatest. Mom and dad were away from you. We had a bicycle for a while, and that was okay. Then we got a driver's license. We were good to go. These kids don't care about the driver's license. All they care about is having a phone and having connection to the internet and what they can do. That's all they care about. So it's a whole different mental mindset. And agreeing with Zach, I mean, on the brain development, we have a doctor, a medical doctor that comes in and speaks to my class. Brain development stops around age 25. We're making connections up until age 25. That's why the drinking laws are at age 21, because usually most of the brain is developed at that point. And so those connections that you're making in the brain, when you start drinking or doing these things before, all that happens, you start killing connections. So drug use, alcohol use, all that kills those connections. Well, these youth don't have those connections all made, and so as they're doing this, it's creating different pathways for those connections and making it harder for them to understand. So if we can at least hold them off as long as possible, it's going to help them as their brain's developing to start making better decisions. Now to get into some of the horror stories. At the high school, we're losing students daily. I'll be real honest. I'm not going to give you any names. I'm not going to go into specifics, but I will give you 4 instances of situations. Many times, it has to do with just dumb thoughts, what we all would think are dumb things. For example, girl taking a picture of herself with a bra on in the mirror, sending it out to people, all right? What happens is you get into these situations, next thing you know, someone is she sends that to them, or with nothing on, sends that to a student. That student then turns around and, hey, Jeff, you're my buddy. Guess what? Look at this picture she sent me. And I send it to him. As soon as I do that, I can't stop what I receive. Whatever I get, I can't stop that, whether it be through email, text, social media, whatever. But as soon as you go boom and hit send, that's when it all goes downhill real fast. Because that's basically, if that girl has sent that to me and I forward it on to Jeff, guess what? I have now transferred child pornography. That's the worst part of it all. That's just the tip of the iceberg, because immediately what starts happening is in the school corporation, they start chasing. They start chasing everything they can do to try to stop that picture from being passed any farther. So they find out who that person sent it to. They go to all those kids, look up all those kids. They pull these kids in and say, hey, who are all your buddies you sent it to? Jeff sent it to Brandon. He sent it to John. And so they start chasing Brandon and John and trying to get it back in, and they're trying to reel it in. Well, you can't keep up with technology. It's just like, when you got caught speeding and you want to run away from the cops, you can't beat the radio. Well, same thing here. You can't hardly catch up with that technology, and so it's hard to do, and so you're trying to chase that. It happens all the time. I'm a PE teacher. We're in the locker rooms. These kids are dressing out. Jeff gets mad at Brandon. Brandon gets mad at Jeff. They get in a fight. What's the first thing a kid does when a fight happens at school? They grab their phone, they pull it out, and start videotaping it. Now, they're in the locker room. So guess what's happening there? Well, Johnny's back there in the background changing clothes, and now you've got him on a video camera, and that's bad. We've had that situation happen before. We've had actually the judge come in and demand phones. I mean, it gets real crazy real fast. And I mean, it's usually not done in a bad way. We've had other incidents at the high school, and I mean, it opens some of your eyes pretty quick, and I'm going to go through a list of them that I have here, but it's crazy what's out there right now. And you wouldn't dream half of it would be there, and I know Zach and I sat down over a cup of coffee, and I was sharing story after story with him, and he was like, are you kidding me? I mean, it just is crazy. In Franklin, last year, and I know I talked with Brandon about it and Zach, and I shared it with some people. After Christmas break, which is kind of a crazy time, and everybody knows in Franklin we have Chromebooks. Most of the other schools have iPads or go into Chromebooks and all that. Over Christmas break, so we were out about 3.5 weeks or whatever it was for Christmas break. It was a long one last year. We came back, and within the first 2 weeks of school, we had 20 kids suspended. 20. Guess what? They were on their Chromebooks doing things they shouldn't be. And as soon as you find that, the school monitors that page. Everything you do on that stinking Chromebook, the school is monitoring 24 hours a day. So as soon as these kids get those Chromebooks, and I'll be real honest, we have a lot of kids at school that I know, and if a kid comes to your class, they don't have a Chromebook, guess what? You're probably going, guess what they've been doing? And the kids know that. I mean, that's what guess what he's been doing? He's been looking at bad sites. And so do we, and so would you guys think the same thing. But it was like in a 2-week time frame, 20 kids out of school, no more Chromebooks, no more of that, and now they're stuck, and then they come to your class when they finally do get back, don't have a computer, don't have a Chromebook, and you're told you're doing your lessons on Chromebook now. So how are they supposed to learn? I mean, there's no pen or paper now. You just go back to the Chromebook, and you're like, uh-oh, how we do this? They've been kicking kids out. They're trying to keep them involved and putting them in the academies or whatever they can to keep them involved in school so they can still get their education. but I mean, we're losing quite a few. I know this situation, I heard it from the police officers because I talked to a lot of the police officers at school because we haven't come in and do guest speaking in our classroom in health with alcohol, drugs, and all that. There was a girl who last year, or a few years ago, honestly, who was very interested in guys with piercings and tattoos. And so she went on Facebook, looked this up, found this guy on Facebook. I don't know who the guy is. No one even knows who he is. Became friends with, asked to be a friend with him. He got friends with her. They were communicating a little bit back and forth, in which he then told her how beautiful she was and how pretty she was and started to reel her in a little bit, asked her to take a picture of herself in her bathing suit. And so she did, which then turned into the next one was in her bra, and she took it. And then the next one was topless. And as soon as he got her topless, he had her because he then blackmailed her and kept blackmailing her and saying, if you don't do what I ask you to, I'm going to put these pictures out there publicly and I'm going to shame you. And basically she then followed suit, continued to follow suit, kept taking more and more provocative pictures until finally one day she broke at school. She broke. She went into the office, sat down and said, I don't know what to do. Crying, all upset. She said, I've been taking these nude photographs for this guy. He was blackmailing me. I didn't know how to handle it, didn't want to go to my parents, didn't know who to go to, and finally she broke at school. Police got involved, tried to track him down. Here's the crazy thing about these websites and a lot of this stuff that happens. They can't really ever track them. I mean, you're chasing. And a lot of them are based out of other countries. And when they're based out of other countries, our police go to them and say, hey, what can we do about this website? And they said, sorry about your luck. We're not doing anything with it. And they don't do anything. There is a web page at Franklin, for Franklin High School girls, to post nude photographs on. Believe it or not. Most of us normally, and as we're talking about the development, wouldn't think of that as a good thing to just go out and take a nude picture. Most of you wouldn't want to see them. But these girls, to get attention, or boys or whoever, are doing that. There is a page designated for Franklin High School girls out there based out of another country that they can never get off the internet. It's factual. I know it's out there. I haven't seen it. I don't want to see it, but I do know it's out there because I've heard the police talk about it. And you would think the majority of these kids would be kids that were troublemakers all the time. Absolutely not. These are good kids, kids that you and I would know, kids that you and I would be around that think, let's get them to church, let's do what we need to do. Athletes, I mean, top kids in their class. All these kids are good kids. And I mean, it's scary, the situations that are out there, but this is factual that this information is out there. It's on the web. There are good kids that we know that our kids probably hang out with or are around, and it's out there all the time. The Chromebooks are an interesting thing because, like I said, the school's monitoring 24 hours a day. They're making sure what they're on, what they're sharing, what they're doing. Some of them are playing games, video games like that during class and all that. That's always my favorite is you sit there and you look at your class, and you can always tell the kid who's on the Chromebook playing a game because they're sitting there doing this the whole time. They're moving the mouse. They're not typing any keys. Their head's down, and they're not looking up. And you look at them, and they go, what? I mean, they're not typing. Everybody else is looking up, typing, doing all that, and they're sitting there just doing this, jaw hanging down. You're like, okay, I can tell who you are. And they think they're slick because they turn it so you can't see. It's all fun. But I don't know. I mean, as a teacher, I think the devices are good, but then I also think they're terrible. So, I mean, it's 6 of one, half dozen. They're not going anywhere. It's here. It's here to stay. That's what they want. That's how they're going to do it. The crazy thing, how much money we spend to put this in front of our kids. I don't know. I'll speak from my experience. I know my cell phone, which I have to have for my job and what I do with recruiting and all that. My wife, she has hers. And my daughter, we added her to the plan. I know for the 3 of us, we spend almost $250 a month just on our cell phone. And the crazy thing is, my daughter, I want to kill her sometimes because I want to choke her, but the data package, we have a big data package. I mean, we probably carry 12 gigabytes of data, which is a pretty big package. I mean, that's like one of the bigger plans. She burns it up like mad. I mean, June, we were headed to Florida. I couldn't even use my navigation because she burned up my data. And I said, here's the deal. You're paying for the extra data I use to take me to Florida because you burn up my data in the first place. And so every gig that we went over was $15 that she had to pay me. And I look at it and I tell her this, and I mean, I saw the video, I've seen that Parenthood episode, and I look at my daughter and I tell her this, your phone is my phone. I have no problem at all grabbing that puppy, punching the code in, because I know the code, and if she changes it, she loses it. I punch it in, and I go through it as much as I want. I'll check text messages, I'll check any social media she has, anything like that. I can't do that to my wife. I might lose my teeth, but my daughter, I can do that to. So I don't let my wife look at mine either, but no, it is what it is. I have nothing to hide from her. I'd give it to her in a heartbeat and let her see it. And she would probably me too. We just have that, respect for each other, and that is privacy to her and to me. But to my child, when I'm paying for it, that's my phone. And that's exactly how I deal with it. All right? Franklin, we've had a big episode in the last few years for early Christmas breaks. Most of you know about it. We've had the bomb threats, and we've had the shooting threats, and we've had all this stuff. The interesting thing is how we found out about the bomb threat, and I mean, this is pretty much public knowledge, is they have a filter system at Franklin schools that when something is posted and tags like the school corporation in it or puts the name of the school in it and mentions the word bomb, a red flag goes up. And so that's how they found that so quick. And honestly, it was in my classroom or my end of the building where that all happened that year. And so it was really a weird situation when they come in and look at you and say, get your class out of here now. And you're like, why? And they said, don't ask questions, just leave. And no one can take a thing out of here. So every bag, everything we had we left and took off. I mean, our computers, everything was still up and going. I mean, you look around and there's police everywhere. Dogs coming in because they brought the bomb dogs in. And no one was allowed to come back and get their stuff. That had to sit there all of Christmas break. And eventually at the end of break, they brought them back in and allowed them, they gave them like a 2-hour window to come in and get stuff. But I mean, they handled it the best way they could. And the crazy thing is as we're doing this, the superintendent's talking to him, and one of the kids is doing this, filming the superintendent as he's talking about it. And he lost his phone, thank goodness. I would have probably taken it and thrown it against the wall, but that would have been but he took his phone away, and I think they gave it back to him later. But, I mean, that's what he's doing. We're in the middle of this meeting about this serious issue, and this kid, what's he want to do? Pop his phone out and go from there. The crazier thing is these kids are smart. They're real smart. As soon as we find out about something that's going on social media or whatever, they've already switched to 3 other things. And most of you, I mean, we were talking about stories and the line, and all these things that are happening on your page or whatever. That's all Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. That's all old news. There's 5 other sites that they're going to before you even know what they are. We went through and did a technology like in-service with all the kids and everybody, and to find out some of the things that were listed as what they utilize, which they actually told you, shockingly, you guys, I mean, I was sitting there going, wow. And I'm pretty active on social media because of golf and all that. So they are 18 steps ahead of us. And by the time we even think of getting there, they're on to something else and on to 3 more things before you even know it. And so a lot of these kids they'll trick you. I'll be straight up honest. As good as kids can be, they'll trick you. They'll create an account that you see, Lauren Holcroft, but then they'll create 3 other accounts that you don't know about. And so then you'll be looking at this one thinking, I'm policing them, I got them, but then there's 2 other ones over there that you're going, oh my goodness. And be real honest, my daughter did it. She created an account before we would let her have one. And she did it on her Chromebook from school. It was a little Instagram account. And it took us about 3 weeks to get that deleted. They didn't want to delete it. We fought with Instagram. We're like, we're her parents. We have the right to take that back. And they said, no, you don't. She created it, but she's a minor. She's under our house. So they didn't care. They wanted to leave it out there. So you guys need to understand, I mean, when you're fighting the social media aspect, you're not winning that. They're going to win more often than not because they like to change that stuff on you. And the last crazy thing that I think is real interesting. As a college coach and is trying to get kids into attend Franklin College over here, these schools, believe it or not, hire students to do nothing but go through kids' social media. That's all they do. And I'm not talking just athletes. I'm talking any student that applies. I was at school, and we had an intern from Franklin College over at the high school, and he was one of the people that the college hired. And he would do nothing but sit on kids' social media pages. And so our person who was higher up in our corporation at the time decided that he wanted this person to start checking on some of the other things dealing with the high school. And so he found some things, and every so often a kid would get called in, not through the dean, not through the principals or anything like that, but through other areas, and they would say, you know, why do you have this on social media? And they're like, seriously, why are you looking at this? And I mean, some of the, you know, acronyms that they have out there for, you know, rolling on the floor laughing or whatever, ROFL and all that kind of stuff are out there. And so they would call them in about some of those and say, why are you putting this on social media? And so you're like, really, who's looking at that? And come to find out, they had used this person to try to figure some of that out so they could see what they were dealing with at the high school. Now, the colleges, I think, have a legitimate answer as far as looking at it, because they're spending money on these kids. I mean, if you're coming in getting a scholarship, whether it be athletic, academic, whatever, they want kids of good character, and they want kids coming in there that's going to represent their institution when they get out of school and everything else. So they're putting a lot of time and effort into that. And with school corporation, high school, it's a little different from that angle, because they're not investing the time and or the money in them like a college is. But they're still looking at it as what can help them in the classroom and where they can go from there. So, you know, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. I know I hope I gave some good information for Zach to kind of keep going with here, but it is a scary time. And I know as a parent, I'm dealing with it just as much as you guys are. The only good thing I have is I have the angle of being a teacher, being a college coach, so I can use that angle because I'm a little more active on social media than maybe some parents normally are. But I do have some of that angle that I'm bringing in. So if I can help you out in any way, I'd love to. I know Zach and I have had many conversations about it, and hopefully, you know, this helps you to understand that it is out there. It is not going away, and it will be here for a long time.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. But how do we even give them smartphones now, right? That's the question we ask a lot of our, and I am going to try to breeze through some of this as fast as I can. We might go a little past 11:30, but I'm going to stay here afterwards. If you have like questions, we'll have a Q&A at the very end. And again, you'll have all the resources of all the stuff that we share, like on a later in the email if you subscribe to our weekly email. So how do we even give them smartphones with this knowledge of how they can be abused? The kind of reactive parenting that we want to avoid, how do we be proactive in the way that we manage our kids' technology so that they don't get 18 steps ahead of us, you know? And so it's a legitimate question, but the good news is the same rules apply to technology as every other parenting concept. There's this myth out there that we have to like learn everything and know everything so that we can control everything. But in reality, you treat it just like any other area of parenting. And here's where I'll give you some examples. For instance, if you want a home that has emphasized that we want openness and honesty in our home, in other words, we have no secrets. We have no secrets in our house. Then that's a rule outside of technology, right? That's a rule. There's no secrets. Well, the extension of that rule to technology is, so when it comes to your texts, when it comes to the social media accounts that you want, when it comes to the App Store, there are no secrets. So I have passwords to all that, and I do check your texts and your social media accounts frequently. I see who you're following. I scroll through your news feeds, and all that kind of stuff. And here's a practical tip I'll give you, is lock down the App Store. Like parents should have the password for the App Store, not your kids. Because there are apps out there that are called disappearing apps, and what they do is they hide different apps that they don't want you to see on their phone, and they can access it through that hiding. And one of them is called just like voice recorder. So it looks like a harmless app, but in reality, it's just built for teenagers to hide stuff from their parents. So there should be nothing on their phones that you don't know about. You should have the App Store locked down under a lock and key, and they don't get wind of that. If they want to download something, it has to go through you. For some of you, that may mean you need to completely reboot the phone because you have no idea what they're hiding on their phones. But the good news I want to reiterate about all this is it's never too late to start something. So remember, we weren't raised right about it to know how to raise right about it. So you can always be open and honest with your kids and say, hey, I just want to apologize. I've not been a good parent in this area, or I've learned how to be a better parent in this area. And so I want to talk about some things here, and you can always start over. Another example is we have curfews, right? Chelsea had a curfew growing up when she was a freshman. Her curfew was 9. So she had to be home at 9. Her phone had to be plugged in and charging in her parents' room at 9. At 10 o'clock, or her sophomore year is 10 o'clock. Her junior year is 11 o'clock. So she was given more freedoms as she got older and learned how to build trust. But there was a curfew, and the same applies to technology. Our kids, they're not allowed to spend the night with someone of the opposite sex. So you're not allowed to spend the night with your phone either, because on your phone, you're spending the night with the opposite sex. I know we don't think about it that way, but they have access to so much on their phone that we're not going to mess with it. You have a curfew, so the same applies to phone. And we'll keep it charging in our room on airplane mode so it doesn't bother us all night. And then in the morning, we'll turn it off airplane mode and you get it back. And it can be that simple. If they say, well, it's my alarm clock, well, then guess what? There's still alarm clocks at TJ Maxx for $10 that you can plug in on the other side of the room so they wake up and have to walk over and get to it. And that just has that has to do with what's being developed as well. And you don't want them to learn that the first thing and the last thing they look at each day is a news feed or a screen. You want them to learn, if you're a Christian parent in this room, you want them to probably spend time with God before they go to bed. So, there's something about just the paper book, reading God's Word and studying through that, and they don't need their phone for that. Most of you probably have lots of Bibles on your bookshelves. Utilize those, and they can still have freedoms, but you limit those the same way you would anything else. And here's what's really important. Effectively communicate that these rules aren't due to a lack of trust, but simply a responsibility to be a good parent and to protect. And here's where this is a huge deal. And you can even use some of this script with your kids. You just say, we never want you to have to carry anything that you have to keep from us. It is a burden. We don't think about it like a burden sometimes, but we don't want you to have to carry something that you have to worry about us finding out about. That's a heart issue, which turns into behavioral issues, which ruins and wrecks people's lives. So we don't want you to have to carry around. It's a form of protection. If I'm not able to access your texts or your social media accounts, I can't protect you. I can't help you so that you're not carrying these things from me. And the second side to that is parents don't want to keep secrets either. So don't spy on your kids. That's the reactive parenting that we saw in the clip at the beginning. She found out she had been spied on and felt violated in her privacy. And there's all those issues that have not been addressed because there's not been an environment of openness and honesty. And so rather than being reactive and spying, because as Andy Stanley would say, spying leads to lying, which leads to crying. And so rather than reactive parenting that way, be proactive and say, I do have access to this stuff. I will see what you see. I do check it on a regular basis, and set it up that way. Not because I don't trust you, because I absolutely trust you. But this is what I have to do to be a good parent. And you have those kinds of conversations with them. You always want to start narrow and give more freedom as they build trust. Like with the curfew thing, it got later. They were given more freedom as they got older, and less. They had less restrictions, and the same is true in different. You can decide when that is. In fact, that's he brought up the driving. When we get them ready to drive, our government says that they can drive at 15, but they can only drive if a parent is in the car with them. And then when they get their license, they can drive on their own, but they can only have one other person with them that's not a family member. And then even until they're 18, there's a curfew. They're not legally allowed to be out past 1 in the morning or before 5 in the morning. It's a law. And then once they're legally an adult at 18, those restrictions are lifted. And so even our government has this kind of setup. And what we want to do is give them a goal. And this, one of my Bible professors said this in developmental psychology, and I'm sure he got it from somewhere else. But the goal you want to have is that by the time they're a senior in high school, you have no rules. Because you've taught them how to manage things properly. You've taught them how to be, because here's the reality. They're going to college next year anyway. They're going to be on their own anyway. They're going to make these decisions on their own, whether you like it or not, anyway. A lot of them will live on campus, away from you, out of your reach, out of your control. And so instead of freaking out at that time, like what if they're doing something not, what do I need to catch them? How can I manage? Instead of asking those questions then, they're adults. Hopefully you've taught them how to make those, how to manage things properly. And because here's the thing, this isn't going away. So they will either figure it out on their own, or you can give them that safety net that if they break rules, if they do things they shouldn't do, guess what? They're still under your roof. You have a chance to catch them. You have a chance to help them and then walk them through it. They do that on their own in college, they're probably not coming back to church. In fact, we see that statistically. They're probably not, that's out of your hands at that point. So his suggestion was that you try to get them ready to have no rules by the time they're a senior in high school. And then you have that year. But until that point, you're not their friend. A lot of parents try to be friends with their kid. You're not their friend. You're their parent. And you have the authority given to you by God and the responsibility to help them learn how to manage these things. And sometimes parents are too shy to come and confront some things because they want to be liked by their kids. And that's a real tension. But it's a bit misplaced because that's not your role yet. It will be. When they're on their own, when they're seniors in high school, when they're at that age where they're kind of more independent, you're there. The best you can do is have constructive conversations with them, because laying down the law won't do it anymore. But that time's not yet. And so the next question is, when do we give them a smartphone then? And when do we give them those freedoms? It's about age and maturity. We think about it as age, when is it acceptable age, but it's age and maturity. The government allows students to drive at 15. Not every student is ready to drive at 15. Not every girl is ready to date at 14 or 16 or even 20. It's age and maturity. And you guys know your kids better than anybody else, so you know how to answer those questions. Your greatest leverage as a parent, right, it is just before you give them something, right? Now, how many of you can recall back to the conversations where they were begging for phones, and you got to the point where you said, okay, I will give you a phone, but here on these conditions. And they were like, okay, please, anything, I'll do anything. And they're, right, you've got them then, right? So your best leverage is just before you give it to them. Now, I recognize a lot of people in the room, but a little too late for that. So, but again, it's never too late to start over. It's never too late to say, hey, I've been learning some things, and I care about you, and I love you, and I trust you, and I want to make sure that your future is set up for success. And because of that, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. And this is not because I don't trust you. This is just because I want to do a better job at teaching you how to manage these things. And they probably won't like it, but that's fine. You're not their friend. You're their parent. And so your greatest leverage is right before you give it to them. Have them sign a phone agreement. And we're going to have a sample of this that is going to be accessible to you this week. That basically says, phone will be turned in at this time each night. I have your passwords and App Store login. You are not to download anything without my permission or knowledge. You are not to keep secrets from me, and I won't keep secrets from you. And you have them sign that they agree to it. If they want the phone that you pay for under your roof, then they have to agree to the cell phone agreement. And if they don't, sorry, we're going to take your phone for a while then. But if they do, then great. Then you have that set up. That way, if you do have to appropriate punishment, it's not you punishing them, it's a decision they made because they signed the agreement. It puts it all in their court. It gives them that freedom. So you basically say, here are your boundaries. Everything else in there is fair game. You can do all that, but here are your boundaries. And as they get older, those boundaries widen. You've got more road to work with. But you got to start somewhere. If they stick to the agreement, they will gain more freedoms and lose restrictions over time. Remember, the goal is to have them ready to handle a smart device by the time they're out of the house. It's not going away, so we want to teach them how to manage it properly and not just shelter them from it, which is a big temptation. So what happens when we have to address some misusages of the device? First thing is don't freak out. If you don't freak out, you'll learn a lot. If you freak out, your kids shut down. So I've seen this, the clip, again, reactive parenting. If you freak out at them, shut down. They're not going to say anything. You're not finding out any other information. You're so good at figuring it out, why don't you figure out the rest? So that's where you'll butt heads because, again, adolescents are becoming more self-aware. They're becoming more independent. They are under construction and learning that they can make some of their own decisions. And sometimes they think they can make more decisions than they really can. But that's where you come in. So don't freak out. Remember that our kids are not responsible for what their friends say. This is really important, okay? You take the opportunity to remind them that their friends will determine the quality of their social media experience. And maybe it's time to stop following that person. Maybe it's time to not be friends with that person on social media. But try not to hold your kids responsible for what their friends say. And this is really crucial. Remind them that openness and honesty, remind them of their phone agreement with you in a discipline appropriately, but remind them that openness and honesty is of the highest priority. Because here's what happens. You can say to them, if you ever find yourself stuck, a conversation goes awry. The first few pictures were okay, but after that, they started getting a little worse. And you are free to come and tell me about those things, and you will not be in trouble. If you ever feel stuck, come to me, and you won't be in trouble. And we do the same thing when we let them go spend the night at a friend's house, right? If all of a sudden at 1 a.m, the tone kind of shifts, and they start talking about stuff or doing stuff or wanting to watch something that they're uncomfortable with, maybe they have a code word that they text you, or they call you and say, hey, I'm not feeling well. Even if they're physically fine, but emotionally they're not feeling well being around this, and you can come get them. They're not in trouble because that started happening there, but because they were honest with you and they told you about it. So the same with technology. We try to differentiate these and put them in different categories, but handle it the same way you would in other areas of parenting. So if you're stuck in a situation, you can always come talk to me. You won't be in trouble. Just come talk to me. I don't want you to ever have to carry something that you have to keep from me, and I don't want you to have to feel stuck. Here's what happens, especially with our daughters, especially with our middle school daughters, is a guy older than her normally will start to have innocent conversations with her over hours or days or weeks, and everything's real nice. He's real sweet and all this kind of stuff, and she wouldn't know otherwise, but it slowly becomes inappropriate. And our middle school daughters especially don't really know when that line was crossed or where it got blurred or when that happened. They don't know what to do. They didn't know at first, but then they start to realize what he's talking about and what he's asking for, and now they're suddenly not really feeling comfortable, but they feel like they've been in it for a while now, but they don't know when it went from innocent to inappropriate. And so then, especially our Christian girls, they don't want to be in trouble, and like they're feeling overwhelmed with guilt, maybe more than anybody else would, and they don't want to come to mom and dad about it. And so they find themselves stuck in this situation. They feel guilty, ashamed, and stuck, and they don't want to tell mom and dad because it's been going on for a while. But that's where if you ever find yourself in that situation, you can come to me and you won't be in trouble, and I'll help you address it. And if more action needs taken, I will help you and I will be your advocate. If you ever find yourself stuck, come talk to me. I don't want you to have to carry something that you have to keep from me. And that's how you can be more proactive in that area. If they receive something inappropriate, illegal, or illegal, tell them to delete it immediately. Don't show their friends. Don't show you as parents. Just delete it immediately and tell you that it happened. This happens from friends, but this also happens from spam accounts. So if you're on Instagram This primarily happens on Instagram. A couple months ago, at the end of the spring, beginning of the summer, there was a huge influx of all these pornographic profile requests that came in to lots of Instagram users, myself included, my wife, some of our friends. And so I started researching it to figure out where these were coming from. So if you're sitting in the room and you received some of those and you thought you were alone, you're not, because pretty much everybody was receiving those. A lot of people were receiving those. And there's lots of different answers to where they could come from people you follow, people buy out information and start following. Even if I have a private account. I'm not public. But what you need to know, not to be scared, just be aware, if you're getting those, your kids are probably getting those. So are they equipped to handle that? Do you have their passwords? Can you see on your screen when they get a follow request from somebody who seems fishy? Because remember, they're being hardwired, and they're starting to have certain triggers and recognize certain things and associate certain images with different things. They're starting to learn about their sexuality. I think that's why orientation gets so jumbled up and mixed up in our culture today, because our adolescents are being exposed to it younger and younger. But this is something to be aware of. This can happen from spam accounts. Maybe that means, and a lot of the research says that that's going to happen every 6 months or so. Just throwing that out there. So something to be on guard for. And maybe that means you start getting them, or you start noticing them. You say, hey, you're not in trouble, but I'm just gonna kind of hold on to your phone, or I'm gonna deactivate your Instagram account for a few weeks until this kind of blows over, and then I'll give you. You're not in trouble, but I just want to protect you. I want to protect your eyes. It's what I call eye rape. Traditional rape is when usually a woman or a girl is preyed on and has sexual advances that are unwanted, right? Eye rape is where you are exposed involuntarily to explicit material unwillingly and unwanted. And our adolescents are being eye raped. In fact, I'm trying to rush through this. While we're on the page of Instagram, I did research on Finsta accounts, which is fake Instagram accounts or spam accounts that students make on their own. I was confused by this, so I did a lot of research on it. And they aren't necessarily bad because, like we talked about earlier, especially Instagram is a performance. So you'll never find a bad selfie on there. You'll find the perfect pictures, the good times. Finsta accounts are usually there, which, by the way, I think your kids should always have private accounts. They should never have public accounts. That's a different thing. But Finsta accounts are always private, and they only allow their closest friends to follow them, and that's when they post the dumb stuff. Or what you have to be careful for is if there's Finsta accounts you don't know about, and then you drop the hammer, because there are no secrets in our home. And then sometimes they use it. They'll be at a party where there's illegal alcohol or drug use, and that can get them into trouble. So they can be abused, but all in all, they could be innocent. So if your kid has a Finsta account, don't necessarily freak out as long as it's accounted for. So that's what I'll say about that. But on the subject of the spam, the eye rape, that kind of stuff to be watching out for, that kind of brings us to the elephant in the room when it comes to smart devices, and that is pornography, is how do we monitor if our kids are doing that? And there's lots of ways. In fact, in the resources you're going to get, there's multiple suggestions for monitoring Wi-Fi and that stuff. I don't think your kids should ever have Wi-Fi in the room alone. I don't think they should ever be able to have access to internet where a door can be shut and they're private. But that's neither here nor there, mostly because of this issue. But pornography is printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or activity intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings. And this is really key and important because what that says is pornography is subjective, not objective.
Now, this is part of why it's so important to know and be cautious about who your kids are following on social media, what they're posting, what kind of internet they have access to, and when. Because our culture and its over-sexualization of any content that gets put out there, whether it's on TV shows or movies or in music or whatever it is, social media is the biggest one, because that's what everybody's on most nowadays. And because most content that's out there is more erotic by nature than it is aesthetic or emotional, this gets confused for our adolescents. So a lot of them, they don't recognize if they're posting something erotic and thinking they're being aesthetic because it's all around them, and they may not know the impact they're having by what they're posting and stuff like that. So this is why this is such a huge deal. Pornography is subjective far more than it is objective. Now, this is a huge deal because our teenagers are exposed to all this explicit content on a regular basis, sometimes unwantingly. We can go back to the iRape thing, and sometimes it's because it's just out there and it's easily accessible. But here's just some statistics that you'll find in the resources here that you're going to receive that are pretty staggering. Here's just a couple of them. One is that about a third of 11 to 14-year-olds have watched porn on a mobile device. And about half of 15 to 17-year-olds have accessed porn on a smartphone or tablet. This is so normalized in our culture today that it makes it difficult for the developing adolescent mind to differentiate which kinds of pictures are okay to post and which are simply more harmful than helpful. When there are pictures of women in bikinis everywhere, and that's thrown everywhere in our culture, our 15-year-olds and our 13-year-olds and our 16-year-olds, they see that, and they think they're being aesthetic when they're posting pictures of that. But what's really happening is that they're posting something erotic. Now, I want to be really humble with how I say this, because I understand this is a huge button in our culture today, and I don't mean to be insensitive or to be sexist or anything like that. I prayed really hard and for a while before even saying this, because if I'm honest, I don't want to talk about this. I feel like I shouldn't have to talk about this, and I don't want to push a whole modesty argument. All right, I've grown up in the church. I've been around that. I think that argument can be a little more one-sided than it needs to be. And here's where we need to go back to what Paul says in that passage we read from the beginning, that while we may have the right, girls fight, it's my body. I can do what I want. I can, all that kind of stuff. And you may have the right to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. Not everything is constructive. And rather than seeking our own good, we should probably be seeking the good of many, the interests of others. Now, guys, absolutely have. Oh, and by the way, 1/3 of the pornography that's accessed today by adolescents, 1/3 of those are by girls, and not. So this isn't just a guy issue. 2 out of 3 it is a guy, but 1/3 it is a girl. So girls struggle with this issue just like guys do at times, and our culture has kind of shaped the female adolescent mind that way, I think, and kind of pit that against them some. But as a church, what's scary is we don't talk about that end of it. So anyway, I'm getting off topic, but guys are fully responsible for their own sin. They can choose to look at an image and choose, to lust after it, or they can choose to use the self-control that God gave them that He didn't give to other animals, and they can be more pure with how they look at things. But here's what I'll say about this. It is one thing to go on vacation or to wear a bikini at the pool. I'm not saying if you wear a bikini you go to hell, but that is a completely different issue than what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about technology. I'm talking about what's posted online permanently for any John Doe to pull up at his will and stare at for however long he wants within the privacy of his own bedroom. Okay? That makes this a completely different issue than just, guys bouncing their eyes at the pool or when they're on vacation. This is in our own homes. This is on their screens. They're seeing their friends this way. In media, when women are thrown around in bikinis, it's for erotic feelings. It's to say, ooh, look at that, and it's not for to be aesthetic or artistic at all. That's not the way it's shown in our culture. And so when our guys see that, when that's what's on social media, Our girls need to be very cautious and aware of that. That they're when they post pictures of that, they're not being cute. And I've heard so many parents say this. Look how cute that is. Look how cute that swimsuit is on her. And I can tell you, it's not cute. Ask any of the guys in her class. They don't think it's cute. And neither should you as parents. It's a slippery slope to go down. And I could get into the history of why the bikini was created and how when it first came out in the 50s, it was meant to be so out there, and so shocking that even top models from the biggest fashion industries, although none of them would model it for the guy who invented it because it was that outrageous. So he had to hire a stripper to model the very first bikini, and it didn't even become mainstream till 20 years later. And so from the beginning, the bikini has been meant to stimulate erotic feelings within those who view, and not aesthetic. It's not meant to be cute. It wasn't created that way. And today, bikini bottoms are cheekies. They're meant to, make the butt more bubbly. They're meant to draw attention to those things. They're carnal in nature. And so, again, I'm not saying, that you want to go on vacation, you want to wear that kind of stuff. I'm not condemning that. What I'm specifically talking about is what is posted on social media for anyone and everyone to look at for however long they want within the privacy of their own home. That's a very big difference. I've got to move on, but please take that seriously. Don't just to think that this is a big modesty process. It's not really what it's about. And I can see the argument where where God created us differently. God is the responsibilities on the guys, and I can understand as an adult you can have that argument. You can make the argument. Everybody's turned on by something different, and that kind of thing. But you cannot make the same comparison for the developing adolescent teenage mind. And ultimately, when a woman wears a bikini, there's the challenge for guys when that happens. But the biggest harm is to the women that wear them, to the girls that wear them. Girls are smart enough most of the time to know that when they post something like that, hey, I get more likes that way. And you just go on any teenager's social media account. The ones with less clothing get more likes a lot of the time. Girls are not naive to that. So in one sense, they kind of know what they're doing. But the biggest harm is not necessarily for the guys who look at that, but for the girls, because guess what? They've got to marry these guys. Do you want them to be confident that they're being pursued for the right reasons, or that the consumer isn't just buying what's advertised? That sounds harsh, but the biggest thing that's at stake here is our daughters. When that happens, it's not just our sons. Moving on. As we kind of wrap up, I want to give you guys some other action steps to be aware of. Beware of location services. Snapchat has recently changed theirs where anyone who is friends with anyone on Snapchat can see their location at all times. Be careful. This is a safety issue for most of our kids. Make sure that that's not on when it's not meant to be on for just anyone to find them. Now, what you have to be careful about is even if you turn that off, next time your Snapchat app updates, it automatically gets turned back on. It does not stay off if you turn it off once. So you're going to have to constantly check your location settings, and that's for all your apps. I know Snapchat specifically does it that way, but you'll have to check that on all your apps. FaceTime should be always be in public settings, all internet usage for that matter at first. You reserve the right to ask the question, who is that? Whenever your kids are in the room and they're texting somebody or they're on FaceTime or whatever, you reserve the right to ask, who is that? God did not create us to be omnipresent. Only He is. If they were in person, you would have to ask that question. You wouldn't have to ask that question, but since they're over a screen, you get to know this person is in your house, even if it's through a screen. Give your kids permission to throw you under the bus. Let them tell their friends, hey, be careful. My parents read everything. They follow me on Snapchat, etc. Give your kids permission to do that, so they can, still maintain the cool factor. Still, it's like, oh, my parents, they're awful. They don't give me any freedom. Just they're following everything. Give them permission to throw you under the bus when they're around their friends, and maybe that'll give their friends an awareness they need to what they're sending to your kids too. What if parents aren't into the whole social media thing? And I've heard this before. It's not as common now as it was 3 or 4 years ago, but my advice would be to get into it. In my last ministry, there was a mom in our church who had a middle school daughter, and she let that daughter have Facebook and Instagram, but she herself was not going to have anything to do with it. And she told me, I don't need to be on social media. I think it's a watered down version of friendships, and I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want to waste my time with it. And so what happened was her daughter could post pretty much whatever she wanted, and mom wouldn't know about it. But I was friends with her daughter, and I could see what she was posting. I could see who she was hanging out with, and I could see the things that she was doing. Mom didn't, and was unaware a lot of the time because it was while she was with friends. And this is not a situation you want to be in. Again, at some point, your kids are going to get on this. This technology is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So the best thing to do is for you as parents to know about what your kids are doing. This same girl, she got into a long distance relationship through Instagram direct message, an older guy, and he was, threatening suicide if she stopped talking to him, all this kind of stuff. She was stuck in it. She was crying, emotional, didn't know what to do, and it really threw her for a loop. And mom had no idea it was going on. It had been going on for months. So even if you're not into the whole social media thing, my advice would be to get into it so that you can look out for your kids. If you have to start over with this whole thing, have a conversation about how you've thought about it. You want to start over. You've learned how you can be a better parent with this thing called technology, and that is not anything to be ashamed of. Just be open with your kids. Be transparent and say, hey, we're always learning, we're always growing, and we want to be the best that we can be at this. And so this is not due to a lack of trust on your part, but this is just something that I feel like God is calling us to do as parents, and it's because we love you and we care about you, and you can have that conversation with them. Well, that wraps it up for this parent class on technology, and you can find below all the resources for the statistics and the articles I was referencing, and you'll even find some tools, reviews on all the different kinds of apps or parental devices that you can get to monitor Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for watching, and let me know if you ever have any questions, and I'd be happy to be here for you. You are not alone.